Well, the role of polling agencies is now in the spotlight after the Coalition's shock election win. Years of polling from a number of different outlets predicted that Bill Shorten and the Labor Party would be successful on Saturday. That's why the actual result came as such a surprise to so many people. The Association of Market and Social Research Organisations has now announced it'll be conducting a review of political polling methods in Australia to try and work out why they got it so wrong and how it can be improved in the future. Joining me live now for more on this is Craig Young. He's the president of the Association of Market and Social Research Organisations. Craig, thanks so much for your time today. I'll start by asking you how it was possible that the polling agencies got it so wrong.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me, Stacey. I think that is a great question. I think that's the question that I was certainly asking myself around 6:30 or 7 p.m. at night last Saturday, and I think a lot of Australians, millions of Australians, were asking themselves the same question. I think, look, to be very clear, that is the reason we need to review what happened with the polling in this election cycle, and I think it's really important that we do get to the bottom of it, because nowadays political polling is fundamental to Australian democracy. I've heard some people saying that they should get rid of polling, or say that it's useless. We need to move away from that. But the reality is, it's here and it's here to stay. So the question is not should we get rid of it. The question is, how do we make it better? And I think that's a question of transparency. Just one other point I want to make quickly, though, is that while it's true to say that all of the major polling companies called the election result incorrectly, it's not quite as simple as saying they got it so wrong, because really you're talking about predictions of the Labor Party getting a two-party preferred vote in the polls of, say, 51 or 51.5%. Now, the actual result turned out to be 49%. That's about a 2.5%, 2% difference. In a lot of cases, that's actually within the margin of error of some of these polls. So certainly, because election polling is so critical to Australian democracy nowadays, and because people take it so seriously, it does need to be held to a really high standard, and I think that's why we need a review.
Yeah, absolutely. And we know that margin of error is around 3%. And when we've got elections that are so tight, and when they are being predicted on a 49-51 prediction, it is tough, and that is within the margin of error. But every poll over the past 2 years or more predicted that Labor would win and Bill Shorten would be the Prime Minister. So I guess that's why so many people were in shock on Sunday.
And including myself, and I'm the president of the Industry Association. And you make a really good point there. That 2% margin of error, or that 2% difference, is the difference between an LNP government getting elected and a Labor Shorten government getting elected. So, perhaps of greater concern to me than apparent concern to me than the polling results immediately before the election was the pattern of results over a long period of time. And I think that is something that we actually need to look at really closely. Why were the polls so consistent in what they were saying? And why did the result apparently change in the last day or two? Now, it could be that the Morrison campaign in the last days of the election was just so strong that those election polls reflected what was actually going on. Or it could be that something else was happening. And I think that is what the media and what the Australian voting public are really interested to find out, and I think they have a right to find that out. So I really think we need some transparency from the polling companies to get to the bottom of that issue.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And there's no doubt as well that now the forensic examination about what went wrong is going to take place. There's lots of talk about the methodology and how polls are conducted, whether or not it needs to be moving with the times, updating itself with technological advances. So can I start by asking you how the polls are conducted? Is it mainly by using home phone lines? And is this something that they need to look at maybe to advance along with technology?
Yeah, look, great point. Look, a really critical thing to understand here is that we need to look at the overall context here of the organisations we're talking about. So let's not forget that despite this apparently aberrant result, or certainly a result that is, I think, causing a lot of concern and attracting a lot of legitimate scrutiny, The polling companies you're talking about, be that Roy Morgan or Newspoll, which is conducted by YouGov Galaxy, or the Ipsos poll, these are polling organisations that have been around for a long time and have a really strong heritage of producing reasonably accurate results. So they're professional organisations, and the methods they use, they do vary, and so they have been keeping up with the times. There's no one right method in research usually. So Roy Morgan, for instance, they pride themselves on using generally a face-to-face methodology, and each methodology comes with strengths and weaknesses. So face-to-face, you benefit from the one-on-one human interaction, but it tends to be very, very expensive and quite time-consuming. A lot of other companies use telephone. Ipsos, for instance, use a mixed landline and mobile phone methodology. And then you have YouGov, which run the Galaxy, and Newspoll. And that methodology, as I understand it, is a combination of robo-polling, so automated voice polling, combined with online polling as well. So you actually have a whole range of different methodologies being used, and that's why I think it's really critical that we get to the bottom of how are those methodologies actually working in each specific instance, and how are they all converging on very, very similar, stable results across quite a long period of time, which do look slightly unusual. Now, I'm certainly not saying that we know that there's anything wrong with those results, but it does look unusual, and I think it's incumbent upon the polling companies to help us understand that by sharing what they've done, so we can try and see whether there was anything that could be improved, and try and move to a better place where we can restore credibility in the quality of polling in Australia.
Do you think it's getting harder to get through to young people in this day and age? I mean, we do have an increasing lack of trust in organisations, and I've got a lot of friends in particular who just won't answer the phone if it's a no-caller ID or a number that they don't know. Do you think that it is getting increasingly difficult to get onto people and get through to them?
Stacey, great point. Look, absolutely. There's no doubt that over the past 10 years, particularly over the last 5 years, that particularly telephone response rates have been declining across the board. It is increasingly hard to get hold of people, including young people. That's why in the research industry there's been increasing adoption of methods like online research, and where telephone interviewing is still conducted. There's been much more of a move towards dual frame, by which I mean landline and mobile phone interviewing, as well as purely mobile phone interviewing. But here's a critical point. The sample frame that's used has to be fit for purpose, by which I mean it needs to be a reasonably good approximation of the total population you're trying to interview. Now, usually in commercial market research, near enough is good enough. But where you're engaged in very high quality measurement practice, like election polling, what we really need is a great sample frame that covers the whole Australian population. And guess what? We don't have access to one. Not one that covers mobile phones. Now, one does exist. The government has it. It's called the Integrated Public Number Database. The market research industry has been trying to get hold of that for many years so that we can conduct more accurate health surveys and more accurate government surveys, including for political polling. And so that's one thing that we can do that would be a really concrete way to improve the quality of the sample coverage for telephone surveys that do election polling.
So why haven't you been able to get your hands on that list?
I think that's a question for government. I think it's been something that we've been advocating. We've been talking to ACMA and the Communications Authority for several years now. Not just because we want access to it for election polling, although that would be really good and really useful, but it would also help us with some of the really important work we do, often for government, paradoxically, where we're trying to measure really important things with market research, like, for instance, are the smoking rates amongst the general population or the cancer rates amongst the general population going up or down? And we want to get those things just right. We want to get them spot on. In those instances, measuring those sorts of things near enough isn't good enough. That's why, as a profession, we've been trying to get hold of that IPND and get access to it. And we don't want identified information. We just want to access that information on a postcode level so that we can say, within this postcode, here's all the mobile telephone numbers. And so then we can do accurate seat-by-seat election polling and also accurate health surveys, smoking prevalence surveys and those sorts of things that are really important to underpin Australian society.
OK, so you've got a review underway now. How long do you expect that to take and what will that entail?
So we would like that to occur swiftly. We think that's really important, not just for the sake of being swift, but we think the Australian voting public wants answers and they deserve answers. So the review's commencing immediately. Over the next week, we'll be establishing a review panel and we'd ideally like that panel to have some external oversight as well. And we're looking to actually produce a report by July. So we'd like that to happen quite swiftly, but we need enough time to do a diligent and thorough job. It will be really important, though, that the polling companies, and particularly the organisations that commission the polling companies to do market research for the election polls, that those sponsoring organisations actually give us access to what they've done, because without their assistance, the review can't actually take place. And I'm very pleased to note that Ipsos has already come out and said that they will cooperate with the industry review as well as conducting their own review. So I applaud them for that, and I'd really love it if Newspol, Essential Media, Roy Morgan and the other polls would come to the party as well, because I think everyone's credibility is at stake here in the polling industry in Australia, and I think we need to demonstrate to the public that we're going to do the right thing and that we're going to be forensic in how we look at this and come back with some real answers.
Well, I'm sure a lot of people are welcoming that, and we will try and stay in touch with you in regards to the review to try and see what the outcome might be. Can I ask you just finally what your final message to Australians are who are now feeling a little bit disillusioned with the polling industry, given the result on the weekend, the shock result, and why anyone should believe the polls moving forward?
So my message would be that Australians have a right to demand a high degree of accuracy from election polls. But I think beyond that, I'd actually ask for something in return from the Australian voting public as well as the media, which is to ask more. I mean, I think what we need here above finger pointing is transparency from the polling companies, but also a bit more nuance and education from the media and a high degree of understanding from the general public, assisted by the media, in understanding what polls actually mean. So I know it's attractive from a media perspective to say, 51% Labor, that's going to mean a Labor government. Well, usually that's not quite what the polls are saying. The polls are usually saying something like, we can say with 99% confidence that the true measure is 51% plus or minus 2 or 3%. Now, that's not a very catchy headline, but that's actually the truth. So again, I come back to the fact that while it's not a very good news grab, but I think as an industry, we need to be more transparent about what we're doing and what our results mean. And I think the media and the public need to educate themselves as well to interpret polls a little bit more. So I think it's a bit of a journey we need to go on together. And there's certainly a key role for our industry to educate the media and the public in that process. So bear with us. We are determined to get to the bottom of it.